When a plus-size single mom walked into a small-town bakery to cancel her son's birthday cake, humiliation was the last thing she needed. But that's exactly what she got. What no one expected was that a handsome millionaire CEO sitting quietly in the corner overheard every word. What he did next would change her life and her child's forever. From heartbreak to hope, from struggle to grace, this story will make you believe in second chances, faith, and the quiet power of kindness. Stay to the end, because sometimes God sends miracles disguised as people. And one of them might just be a handsome millionaire CEO who remembers what it's like to be poor. The bell above the door at Bluebird Bakery chimed as Ruth Morales stepped inside, her breath catching in the sweet warmth of vanilla and cinnamon. The room glowed with small-town comfort: checkered curtains, hand-lettered chalkboards, a display of buttercream roses. But none of it steadied the tremor in her hands. A plus-size woman in a faded denim jacket, Ruth braced the glass counter like it could hold up more than elbows. Overdue rent, medical paperwork, and the ache of too many nights in a pediatric oncology ward. "Morning," said the clerk, a girl in a crisp apron whose eyes slid to the hospital wristband Ruth had forgotten to cut off. "Pickup?" Ruth swallowed. "Cancel." The word came out ragged. "I need to cancel the cake for Saturday." The clerk's smile thinned, then retreated altogether. "You're canceling the custom order? The baseball field with the little fondant mascots? We already started." "I'll cover the deposit," Ruth whispered. I'm sorry." The girl's glance skimmed over Ruth. Her soft arms, her sturdy legs, the thrift store purse hugged to her chest, and came back with something like judgment. "We have policies for last-minute cancellations, ma'am." From the corner, a man in a slate suit glanced up from his coffee. He'd chosen a back booth, away from the morning rush of Riverton, Ohio, a river town with church bells and Little League banners fluttering in May wind. His name was Adrian Pierce, CEO, investor, speaker on stages Ruth had never seen, his hair a careful salt and pepper, his shoes a quiet kind of expensive. Riverton was a pit stop on the way to Cleveland. Nothing more. But now his attention snagged on the way Ruth pressed trembling fingers to the counter, as if praying under her breath. "Policy or not," the clerk added, "we can't just—" "Please," Ruth's voice frayed. "My boy's turning 8. He asked for a baseball cake, green frosting like the outfield. He said if we put the bases just right, it would be good luck for the strike zone." Her smile tried, sank. "I'm choosing between electricity and gas this month. His chemo made the house so cold." The word chemo landed, sharp and small. For a heartbeat the room went quiet. Then the clerk regrouped, straighter, guarded. "I'm sorry for your situation, but the deposit barely covers materials." Ruth nodded, cheeks hot, and tugged out wrinkled bills. Thomas, Tommy. Morales waited for her 2 blocks away at St. Bridget's Clinic for labs and hydration. His cap covered new baldness. Stickers bloomed across his water bottle like tiny, stubborn prayers. She had promised him a cake. She had promised a lot of things. In the corner booth, Adrian set down his cup. Years of boardrooms had trained him to recognize pivots, moments when quiet becomes signal, when you move or regret it. He rose, smooth and unhurried, approached the display case with its neat rows of pastel cupcakes. "If I may," he said, gentle as he could make his voice. "What was the design?" The clerk startled, recalibrated at the tailored suit. Ruth's gaze flicked up, wary. "Baseball field," she murmured. "Grass green, white bases, Tommy on the pitcher's mound." "Saturday." Adrian nodded once. The syllable tasted like memory, his mother counting tips at the kitchen table. Him, age 8, blowing out a single candle on a store cupcake because cake was luxury for when Daddy lands a steady job. Daddy never did. To the bakery, he said, turning to the clerk. I'd like to settle the full balance, plus your labor so there's no loss. He slid a black card across the counter, then added to Ruth. And the ball field itself. May I make a suggestion? Ruth straightened, mortified fury flushing her face. You don't have to, I know, he said. But I'd like to. He searched for words that were neither pity nor performance. When my mother couldn't afford cakes, neighbors showed up. Not with charity, with presents. Let me be a neighbor. Behind the counter, the bakery owner, Mrs. Lila Blue, flour dusting her sleeves, appeared like a soft-footed rescue. Mr. Pierce, she said, recognizing him with a blink that she mercifully kept private. We can make the cake, no problem. And if there's a party, we can do lemonade, cookies, the works. She looked at Ruth with a warmth that scolded the chill from the clerk's eyes. Honey, your boy will have his field of dreams. Ruth swayed, then steadied, palms pressed together at her heart. I'm not a project, she said thickly. I won't be someone's feel-good story. You're not, Adrian answered, the words landing as a vow. You're a mother. That's the highest job title I know. Mrs. Blue folded her arms, decision made. We'll call Coach Ramirez at Riverton Little League and book the diamond? Saturday at 2. I'll get the volunteer moms for decorations. If Mr. Pierce is buying, I'm multiplying loaves and fishes. Ruth's breath hitched into a laugh that hurt. She crossed herself out of long habit. Lord, give me grace not to cry in front of strangers, she whispered, then couldn't help it. The tears came anyway. Tommy loves baseball. When he's tired from treatment, he watches highlight reels and tells me God loves home runs. God loves grit, Mrs. Blue said briskly, handing over tissues. Home runs are a bonus. Adrian took out his phone, already cueing a cascade. His assistant to call the Parks Department, his foundation director to set up a contingency fund under the radar, an old friend at Children's Hospital to ask about ride-share vouchers for families in chemo cycles. But he kept his eyes on Ruth while he spoke, measuring not just needs, but dignity. When he hung up, he said, May I ask Tommy's favorite team? The Red Sox, Ruth said, then grinned, self-conscious. Don't tell the local dads. Noted, he replied, mouth twitching. We'll decorate accordingly. Ruth hugged her purse tighter, as if to keep herself from handing him the whole of her life in gratitude. Why are you doing this? Adrian paused, honest. Because someone should have done it for my mother. Because I can. He softened. Because I think God nudges us with small bells over bakery doors. Ruth's shoulders lowered, an inch of trust earned. My son's name is Tommy, she said. He's brave, braver than me. Then Saturday, Adrian promised. We'll build him a day that says so. Outside, the river wind lifted the bakery awning. Ruth stepped into sunlight that felt, for the first time in weeks, like it was shining for her too. Behind her, the clerk ducked her head, cheeks pink with something like apology. Ruth almost turned back to offer her a smile. Instead, she looked up, blue sky, church steeple, whispered, "Thank you," and walked toward St. Bridget's with a future in her pocket she hadn't expected to find. Back in the booth, Adrian stared at the cooling coffee, at his schedule filled with panels about innovation. He took out his pen and crossed out a weekend of speeches. Some things, he decided, you don't delegate. Some things you show up for yourself. Saturday unfurled bright as a promise. Riverton's Little League diamond, Ramirez Park, wore streamers of red and navy, paper pennants fluttering like small, brave hearts along the chain-link fence. A banner read, "Play ball, Tommy," in blocky paint that clearly came from eager little hands. Under the bleachers, coolers sweated, lemonade winked in clear dispensers, and Mrs. Blue's folding tables sagged beneath cookie platters, bowls of grapes, and a sheet cake that looked exactly like a ballpark in June. Ruth guided Tommy from their beat-up sedan, her arm a steady rail. He wore a Red Sox cap low over the smooth curve where hair used to be, batting gloves too big for his chemo-thinned wrists. His breath caught, then his whole face opened, light flooding in. "Mom?" It was a whisper and a shout at once. From the dugout, 10 kids erupted. "Surprise!" Gloves up, hats waving, they swarmed, then stopped, remembering what the doctors had said about germs and hugs. Coach Ramirez clapped twice, a conductor cueing the orchestra. "Fist bumps only, gentlemen and ladies. Tommy's got rockets to launch today." Ruth laughed, a sound with salt still in it. She felt the old ache, too, how joy arrived now with careful choreography, but she pushed past it. "Go," she told Tommy. "Go claim your outfield." He did, small legs pumping, cheeks flushed. The sun glazed the grass to an almost holy green. For weeks that tasted like metal, chlorine wipes, antiseptic soap, reheated soup in a plastic bowl. Ruth had prayed for one day that felt like childhood again. Here it was, catch in the outfield, chalk dust on knees, cupcakes smearing frosting on eager mouths. At the periphery, Adrian Pierce watched from the shade of a silver maple, jacket off, sleeves folded to his forearms in a dressed-down truce with small-town Saturday. He'd arrived early, carrying boxes, stringing lights, demonstrating a surprising muscle memory for tying sailor knots in pennants. Now he kept distance by instinct and intent. Let the day belong to Tommy. Let it belong to Ruth. Mrs. Blue appeared with a tray of cake squares for taste testing, and with her, a hesitant figure, the clerk from the bakery, hair now pulled back, humility softening her eyeliner. She hovered near Ruth and cleared her throat. "Ms. Morales?" The voice, stripped of polish, was just a girl's. I wanted to say I'm sorry, I was unkind. We see people rush in, cancel, argue, and I didn't see you." Ruth turned fully, meeting the apology in the eyes, not just the words. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. "Would you help me pass plates?" Forgiveness, it turned out, could be as practical as a stack of Dixie-ware. Games unfolded, relay throws, a running bases drill arranged so no one collided with Tommy's port bandage, a slow-motion home run trot that ended with the entire bleachers singing off-key happy birthday. When the sheet cake came, a perfect green field with fondant bases and Tommy on the mound. The boy's breath fogged the frosting for a second. Then came the candle wish. Ruth didn't need to ask what he'd wished for. Mothers learned to hear the quiet part. Adrian edged closer only when he saw Coach Ramirez wave him over. "Mr. Pierce," Coach said, "your throw is too pretty to waste. Mind lobbing soft toss?" "I'd be honored," Adrian answered. And for 20 minutes he knelt at the plate, underhanding rainbow arcs to kids who grunted and giggled and whooped. Tommy connected, a clean clack that lifted to shallow right. He grinned like sunlight had been reinvented. Ruth stood a pace behind, arms folded around herself, absorbing it all like a field absorbs rain after drought. She whispered a line she knew by heart. "Give us this day our daily bread." It turned out bread could be cake. It could be second base chalk on sneakers. It could be a stranger deciding not to be a stranger. When the games wound down and the last of the frosting was swiped from the corner of Tommy's mouth, Adrian finally approached Ruth with a measured, respectful gravity, stopping far enough away to make it easy for her to say no to anything he might offer. "Thank you," Ruth said before he could speak. "For," she gestured at everything, "for the steady way you made a big thing feel human." "I promised to be a neighbor," he said simply. "Neighbors pitch in. They also ask permission." He glanced at the field. "May I ask you something? Strictly logistical." She braced, though his tone had no pity in it, only care. "Ask." "My foundation, quietly if you prefer, can underwrite gas cards and ride services so treatment days aren't a coin toss with car trouble. We've done similar programs. No strings, no photo ops." Emotion pricked behind her eyes. "You've already done so much." "Today was cake," he said. "Tomorrow has chemo on the calendar. I'd like to help with the unglamorous Tuesdays." She could have said no from pride, from fear of owing. Instead, she thought of Tuesday mornings in dim pre-dawn, praying in the car while the heater coughed to life. "Gas cards," she said, voice steady. "Nothing else unless we agree to it together." "Together," he echoed. A breeze lifted, and for a moment Ruth saw how tired he looked beneath the polish, how his careful kindness cost him something she couldn't name. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was the nerve of letting his heart make decisions his assistant couldn't schedule. She surprised herself by asking, "Do you have children, Mr. Pierce?" "No," he said softly. "But I was a child once who needed a day like this, and a mother who never got one." Ruth nodded, understanding landing without words. "Then you know why I fight." "I do." He hesitated. "May I also connect with St. Bridget's? Not to meddle, just to ask what they truly need." "Talk to Nurse Patel," Ruth said, a little smile tugging her mouth. "She runs the world from a rolling cart." They stood a comfortable minute, watching Tommy hold court with his teammates, describing, in great and wildly inaccurate detail, the physics of his opposite field hit. The clerk drifted by with a trash bag, offering Ruth a shy thumbs up. Mrs. Blue bossed volunteer dads like a benevolent general. Coach Ramirez marked chalk lines for next week's practice with the contentment of a man whose field had witnessed something right. "Can I ask you something else?" Ruth said at last, forcing courage up through her ribs. "Please don't post about us. I don't want Tommy to be a story people argue about online." Adrian's answer was immediate. "He's not content," he said. "He's a kid. I'll keep it quiet." The gratitude Ruth felt then surprised her with its relief. She reached out, not to shake, but to squeeze his forearm, a brief, honest gesture. "God bless you," she said. "And God keep you steady if you decide to keep showing up. It's not always cake around us." "I've noticed," he said, mouth tilted, eyes gentler than they were 2 days ago in a back booth. "But some things you don't delegate." When dusk began to blue the outfield, Ruth buckled a sleepy Tommy into the car. He clutched a plastic trophy Mrs. Blue had snuck into the goodie bags, most courageous swing, and murmured, "Best day." Ruth looked up at the sky rinsed with first stars. "Thank you for daily bread," she said again, and this time she added, "and for neighbors we didn't know we had." Back at the park, under the silver maple, Adrian lingered long enough to help coil lights. He texted his assistant 2 words that rearranged his calendar. "Riverton matters." Then he put his phone away and drove into a night that had, for the first time in years, a purpose waiting on the other side of morning. 3 weeks passed after the baseball field miracle, Spring thickened into June, and Ruth Morales learned again how quickly a good day could fade into the next fight. The electric bill came due. Tommy's white blood cell count dipped. The old car's check engine light blinked like a cruel joke. But even in all that, the glow of that Saturday lingered. How Tommy had laughed. How strangers had come together. How one man in a gray suit had looked at her without pity. She hadn't seen Adrian Pierce since the party. Maybe that was for the best, she told herself. He was a billionaire with conferences, boards, interviews. She was a nurse's aide counting every minute of overtime before the next shift at St. Brigid's Pediatric Oncology. Their worlds had brushed like wings and gone their separate skies. Then one afternoon, the hospital director, Dr. Winters, called her into the office. The tone was unreadable, the same one used for bad lab results or sudden policy changes. Ruth's stomach knotted. "Ruth," the doctor began, sliding a folder across the desk. "The Pierce Foundation has reached out. They're launching a new nursing scholarship, full tuition, living stipend, childcare assistance. They specifically asked for you." Ruth blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Me? That must be no mistake," Winters said softly. "Apparently Mr. Pierce met you recently. He told the board you remind him of someone who once saved his life." The room blurred. Her first instinct was resistance. I can't accept charity." "This isn't charity," the doctor countered. "It's investment. You've worked harder than anyone here. Apply, Ruth. Let good things happen to you for once." That night, she spread the paperwork on the kitchen table beside Tommy's homework. The boy colored a picture of himself with a bat in one hand and a cake in the other. "What you reading, Mom?" "Something scary," she said with a wry smile. "Good scary. Maybe a door God opened." "Then don't be afraid to walk in," Tommy replied, parroting the chaplain at St. Brigid's. He was 8 going on 40 sometimes. Ruth laughed through the tears. "You little preacher." Still, doubt gnawed. Accepting this gift meant admitting she needed it. Pride had been her armor since the day her husband left, muttering that hospitals and prayers wouldn't pay rent. Pride had kept her upright when chemo bills arrived with red stamps. Could she trade it now for a possibility she didn't even dare imagine? A week later, Ruth returned to Bluebird Bakery for coffee after a long shift. The smell of cinnamon sugar wrapped her like memory. Mrs. Blue spotted her instantly. "Honey, I was wondering when you'd wander in. Mr. Pierce asked about you. Nicely, not nosy. He said he'd sent something through the hospital." "He did," Ruth admitted. "A scholarship. It's too much." Mrs. Blue dried her hands on her apron. "He said once his mama worked 3 jobs, cleaned offices at night, and never took help. He built an empire thinking independence was holiness. Took him 40 years to realize grace is different from handouts." Ruth stared at the sugar jar, words pooling behind her ribs. "He told you all that?" "People tell bakers everything," Mrs. Blue said, tapping her nose. "You should see what frosting brings out of folks." That evening, Ruth opened the envelope again. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy paper. "Mrs. Morales, this isn't charity. It's faith in what you already are. Steady, kind, tireless. The scholarship is merely a bridge. Walk across it if it feels right. With respect, AP." She exhaled, the decision already forming. She would apply. She would trust that maybe God sometimes delivered blessings through men in tailored suits. 2 weeks later, the hospital called with confirmation. Accepted, fully funded, classes beginning in September. For the first time in years, Ruth dared to picture a future that didn't revolve around survival but growth. Her in scrubs with a badge that read, "Registered Nurse." Tommy healthy enough to cheer from the stands again. The letter came the same day as another envelope, season tickets to the Boston Red Sox, tucked beside a simple note. For Tommy. Childhood should include wonder. Take him when you can. No obligations. Ruth traced the embossed seal, torn between warmth and unease. The tickets felt personal in a way that blurred the boundary she guarded so fiercely. That night she drafted an email. "Dear Mr. Pierce, I'm deeply grateful for your generosity and will accept the scholarship, but I must decline the tickets. I want to earn every joy my son receives. Thank you for believing in us. Ruth Morales." She attached a photo of Tommy's handmade thank you card, crayon baseballs, and a stick figure in a suit labeled Mr. Nice Cake Man. The reply came within minutes, even though it was nearly midnight. "Ruth, congratulations on the scholarship. As for the tickets, please reconsider. I grew up without such moments. Take him once, if only to see his eyes when the crowd roars. No strings, promise." Adrian Ruth stared at the glowing screen, torn between suspicion and something that felt dangerously like trust. She closed the laptop without replying. A week later, Tommy's oncologist delivered rare good news. Numbers up, energy returning. "He's strong enough for short trips," she said. "Baseball games included." Tommy's face lit like sunrise. "Mom, Fenway Park, please?" Ruth's resistance melted. "All right," she sighed, smiling. "Just one." When they arrived, the green of Fenway seemed too vivid to be real, the air thick with popcorn and organ music. Their seats, close enough to see players spit sunflower seeds between pitches, were the kind you saw on TV. Tommy bounced, clapping, shouting stats at the scoreboard. Ruth looked around, overwhelmed by gratitude and guilt in equal measure. She didn't notice the elegant older woman who leaned toward her until she spoke. "Would you like me to take a picture of you two?" Ruth handed over her phone, grateful. "Thank you." The woman smiled as she snapped a few shots. "Your boy looks happy." "He is," Ruth said. "A friend made this possible." "Adrian Pierce," the woman said knowingly. "He's my son." Ruth froze. "Mrs. You're Eleanor Pierce." The woman extended her hand, grip warm, eyes kind but sharp. "And you're the reason my son finally remembers what kindness feels like when it costs him time instead of money." Ruth blinked, unsure what to say. "I didn't do anything." "You did more than you know," Eleanor said, gaze following Tommy's cheering silhouette. "You reminded him who his mother was before success polished the edges off his heart." Ruth's throat tightened. "He's done too much for us already." Eleanor smiled gently. "Then let him. Some men build towers of glass and steel trying to prove they're good. The wise ones learn that sometimes goodness looks like cake frosting and a child's laughter." When the crowd erupted for a home run, Tommy jumped, yelling, "Mom! Did you see that?" Ruth waved back, eyes stinging. Somewhere deep down, beneath all the gratitude and confusion, a seed of something new began to grow. Something that wasn't pity or pride, but possibility. Eleanor leaned close enough to be heard above the roar. "He's lonely, you know," she said. "And you, my dear, have the kind of faith that could teach a man like him what home really means." Ruth turned toward the field, heart pounding. She didn't know what destiny looked like, but she was certain of one thing. God had just widened the story again. Autumn had come early to Riverton, the air crisp with the smell of wood smoke and wet leaves. 6 months had passed since the day Ruth Morales canceled a birthday cake, and somehow, that day had rewritten every chapter of her life. The Pierce Foundation scholarship had lifted her into the nursing program she once only dreamed about. Classes were demanding. Her nights were long, balancing study with shifts at St. Bridget's and caring for Tommy. But it was a holy exhaustion, the kind that came from purpose, not fear. Tommy's hair had begun to grow back, soft and downy like the fuzz on a peach. He was in remission now, a word Ruth still whispered like a prayer she didn't want to wake. Adrian Pierce had kept his word. There were no headlines, no photo ops, just quiet check-ins through the foundation's staff, an occasional note. "How's the little slugger? Tell him the Red Sox owe him another win." They hadn't met in person since Fenway, but he lingered at the edges of her days, a presence like the steady hum beneath a hymn. Until one evening in late October, when Ruth opened her apartment door to find Eleanor Pierce standing there again, holding a box from Bluebird Bakery. "Mrs. Pierce?" Ruth blinked, startled. "I didn't expect—" The older woman smiled. "Call me Eleanor. And don't worry, I brought cinnamon rolls, not surprises. Although," she tilted her head, "my son's in town." Ruth's breath caught. "Adrian? He's meeting with the hospital board about expanding the scholarship program," Eleanor said, her eyes warm with knowing. "He'll probably find his way here afterward, if I know him at all." Eleanor stepped inside, admiring Tommy's drawings taped to the wall. Planets, baseballs, crosses. "He's thriving," she said softly. "And so are you." Ruth shook her head. "I'm surviving. There's a difference." Eleanor's gaze softened. "Surviving is just the first verse of thriving, dear. You're already singing the rest." They shared coffee and quiet talk until a knock came, soft, almost hesitant. Ruth opened the door, and there he was. Adrian Pierce, in a navy sweater instead of a suit, autumn wind tugging at his hair, eyes uncertain in a way she'd never seen before. "I hope this isn't bad timing," he said. "Good timing," Eleanor answered for her, rising with a smile that said she'd accomplished exactly what she came for. "Tommy, darling, would you walk me to my car?" When the door closed behind them, the apartment seemed smaller, not from awkwardness, but from everything unspoken between them. "You look tired," Ruth said gently. He laughed. "That makes two of us. The foundation's growing faster than I expected. We're opening a permanent office here, and I wanted you to hear that from me." "Here? In Riverton?" He nodded. "I thought it was time to stop just writing checks and start showing up." Ruth smiled faintly. "You already did." Adrian took a step closer, then another. "Ruth, I've been in rooms with presidents and investors, but the only place I've felt peace this year was at your kitchen table helping Tommy glue foam planets together." Her pulse quickened. "You're not saying what I think you're saying." He met her eyes, his voice low. "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm saying that what started as a promise to a sick boy became the only thing that's felt real in a long time." Ruth looked away, torn between longing and fear. "You live in a world of private jets and press releases. I live in a world of overtime shifts and rent notices. You can't just bridge that gap with good intentions." Adrian smiled sadly. "Good intentions? No. But love, maybe." The word hung between them like a fragile glass ornament, too beautiful, too dangerous to touch. Ruth's eyes filled. "Tommy's already attached to you. If this doesn't work, he's the one who breaks." "I know," Adrian said softly. "That's why I'll never make a promise I don't mean." Silence stretched. Then Ruth did something she hadn't done since before the diagnosis, before the debt. before the world had taught her to expect disappointment. She reached out. Her fingers found his, rougher than she'd imagined for a man of wealth. "Then we take it slow," she said. "Step by step, like rounds of treatment, like faith." Adrian nodded, and something eased between them. Not fireworks, but a quiet certainty, the kind you build a life around. 3 months later, winter settled in. Ruth's new title, Program Coordinator, Second Chance Nursing Initiative, gleamed on a brass plaque outside her small office. The foundation had purchased a modest house nearby to serve as housing for scholarship recipients. It had 3 bedrooms, a study, and a backyard where Tommy could practice his swing under strings of light. One snowy evening, Adrian arrived with Tommy in tow, both of them bundled in scarves, laughing about a missed snowball throw. "Mom!" Tommy burst through the door. "Guess what? Mr. Adrian says I have major league potential." "Major heart, maybe," Adrian corrected, shaking snow from his coat. "We'll start there." They gathered around the kitchen table, the same one where Bills and Miracles had once shared space, eating stew, laughing, praying before the meal. Later, when Tommy went to bed, Ruth and Adrian stepped onto the porch. Snowflakes drifted in the porch light, and somewhere a church bell struck 9. "You kept your promise," Ruth said quietly. "So did you," he replied. "To what?" "To keep believing when everything said not to." Ruth turned toward him, her voice trembling. "Do you ever wonder why God chose that bakery, that moment?" He looked up at the snow falling soft and sure. "Maybe because that's where 2 miracles were standing in line. One trying not to cry, the other trying to remember how to feel." Ruth smiled through tears, and he decided to introduce them. Adrian reached for her hand, their fingers fitting like the last missing piece of a long-forgotten puzzle. Inside, Tommy stirred in his sleep, clutching a worn baseball glove. On the nightstand beside him sat a framed picture of his birthday cake, green frosting, white bases, his name in the center. "Downstairs," Ruth whispered. "For all of it. The struggle, the strangers, the second chances, thank you." And outside, under the quiet snow, the world kept turning. Small-town lights glowing against the dark. 2 souls learning that sometimes the greatest miracles start with a canceled cake and end with a family built not by chance, but by choice.